If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll continue. In South Kensington, London, an imposing mansion stood, looking more like a museum than a home. Cast-iron gates protected impeccable gardens, where every shrub was trimmed with millimetre precision, and every marble fountain reflected the coldness of money well invested. There lived the Alistair family, known in business circles as a synonym for power and influence. But within those walls of Portland stone and tempered glass, hidden among empty drawing rooms and endless corridors, resided a sadness that no fortune could cure. Gabriel Alistair was only 9 years old when his story began to be told in the whispers of the servants. He was born on a rainy April morning, the only son of Marcus Alistair, a real estate magnate, and Marina, a delicate woman who did not survive complications from childbirth. The boy came into the world surrounded by renowned doctors, state-of-the-art equipment, and all the infrastructure money could buy. But something was wrong, something no device could predict. Gabriel never saw the light of day. The first few months were of denial. Marcus Alistair could not accept that his heir, the boy who would one day command the empire he had built, could carry such a devastating limitation. He hired the best ophthalmologists in the country, then from Europe, then brought specialists from the United States and Canada. All arrived at the mansion with their Italian leather briefcases, their framed diplomas, and their carefully calculated promises. And all left with the same cold, technical, implacable diagnosis: irreversible optic nerve damage, with no possibility of regeneration known to modern medicine. Gabriel grew up in a world of sounds, smells, and textures. He knew every room in the mansion by the number of steps required to cross it, recognized the servants by their voice timbre and the perfume they wore, knew when it was morning by the bird song in the garden, and when it was night by the heavy silence that descended upon the grand house. But he did not know colours. He did not know what his own father's face looked like. He did not understand what it meant to see a star. At 7 years old, he asked for the first time what the blue of the sky was like. The governess, Mrs. Joanna, an elderly lady from the Yorkshire Dales who had worked in the house since before he was born, tried to explain with gentle words. She said it was like feeling a cool breeze on your face on a warm day, like diving into clean water, like the feeling of peace that comes when all is well. Gabriel listened in silence, but inside he felt an emptiness that no comparison could fill. Marcus Alistair was rarely home. His meetings consumed his days, his business dinners occupied his nights, his international trips filled his weekends. When he crossed paths with his son in the corridors, he quickly patted his head, mumbled something about having a lot of work, and disappeared again. Gabriel had learned early on not to expect more than that. He had learned to live with the absence of someone who should have been present. The mansion functioned like a well-oiled machine. Cooks prepared elaborate meals that Gabriel ate alone at the immense dining table. Cleaners tidied rooms that never received visitors. Security guards watched gates that rarely opened. And Gabriel moved through it all like a ghost, always guided by someone, always dependent on others' hands, always reminding everyone that, despite all the wealth, there were things money couldn't buy. It was on a muggy January afternoon that everything began to change. Marcus Alistair was in his second-floor study, discussing the details of a £1 billion development over the phone, when Mrs. Joanna knocked urgently on the door. The governess had given her notice. After 15 years of dedication, she needed to return to Manchester to care for her ailing mother. Marcus felt the news as a blow. Mrs. Joanna was the only person he fully trusted with Gabriel, the only one who seemed genuinely to care for the boy beyond the salary she received. The search for a replacement began immediately. Advertisements were placed in high-end newspapers, specialized agencies were contacted, references were checked with military rigor. Dozens of candidates were interviewed. All had impeccable resumes, proven experience, certificates from various courses. But none convinced Marcus. There was something artificial about all of them, a professional cordiality that lacked true affection. That's when the agency called about a last-minute candidate, a woman who had just arrived in London from the Lake District, without extensive references in the capital, but with years of experience caring for children in delicate situations. Her, Name was Helen Taylor. Helen arrived at Alistair Manor on a grey morning. She was around 40, with brown hair tied in a simple bun, serene eyes that seemed to carry ancient stories, and hands calloused by work. She wore modest but clean clothes and carried only a small suitcase and a faded fabric bag. When she entered the main hall, her eyes swept over the paintings on the walls, the crystal chandeliers, the Italian marble floor, but her expression showed neither awe nor intimidation, just an almost disconcerting calm. Marcus received her in his study, accompanied by Mrs. Joanna, who would facilitate the transition before leaving. The questions were direct. Helen answered with simplicity, without trying to impress. She recounted that she had grown up on a farm near Windermere, that she had looked after younger siblings since childhood, that she had worked for years in a home for children with special needs. Her voice was soft but firm, carrying a quiet confidence that didn't seek approval. "You understand my son is blind, right?" Marcus asked sharply. "I understand, yes," she replied without flinching. "And I understand that he is first and foremost a child. He needs care, attention, someone who sees in him more than just a limitation." Marcus frowned. He wasn't accustomed to being confronted, even gently, but there was something about Helen that disarmed him. Perhaps it was the weariness from so many interviews. Perhaps it was the tight deadline with Mrs. Joanna's departure, or perhaps it was something deeper he couldn't name. "You're hired," he finally said. "You start tomorrow." Helen thanked him with a nod and was escorted to her room, a small but comfortable space on the third floor overlooking the garden. Mrs. Joanna accompanied her, explaining Gabriel's routines, schedules, and preferences. Helen listened attentively, asking specific questions, noting details in an old notebook. When she was finally alone, Helen opened the window and took a deep breath. The air of London was different from the air of the Lake District, heavier, more urgent. But she was not afraid. She knew why she was there. She knew what she had to do. The next day, Mrs. Joanna introduced Helen to Gabriel. The boy was in the garden, sitting on a stone bench under a century-old jaboticaba tree. It was his favorite spot, the only place where he felt he could breathe without the constant surveillance of the servants. When he heard approaching footsteps, he instinctively raised his face, as he always did when someone came near. "Gabriel, this is Mrs. Helen. She will look after you from now on." The boy didn't respond immediately. He was accustomed to staff changes. Servants came and went. Some stayed for months, others for years, but none truly stayed. "Hello," he finally murmured, polite but distant. Helen didn't force anything. She simply sat beside him on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. Mrs. Joanna, realizing her presence was no longer needed, bid farewell with a gentle pat on Gabriel's head and returned to the house, leaving the two alone. "Do you like being here?" Helen asked after a silence. "It's where I feel the sun," Gabriel replied. "I can't see it, but I can feel it when it's warm on my face." Helen nodded, though she knew he couldn't see her. "And what else do you feel here?" Gabriel seemed surprised by the question. No one had ever shown real interest in what he felt. "The smell of the jaboticabas when they're ripe," he said slowly. "The wind rustling the leaves, the birds. There's one that sings. Every morning I think it's a thrush." "You pay a lot of attention to sounds, don't you?" Helen observed sweetly. "It's all I have," Gabriel said with a maturity that didn't match his 9 years. "No," Helen corrected gently. "It's one of the many treasures you have. And I'm going to teach you to discover many others." Gabriel turned his face in the direction of her voice, confused. "What do you mean?" "You know the world through other senses. That's not a loss. It's a different kind of gift, and I came here to help you unwrap that gift." For the first time in a long time, something stirred within Gabriel. A small spark of curiosity, perhaps of hope. Helen's voice held no pity, no condescension. It held only a quiet certainty he had never heard before. In the following days, Helen established a routine completely different from what Gabriel was used to. Instead of simply guiding him from one room to another, she would stop in each space, describe details, invite him to touch things that were previously just obstacles. She took him to the kitchen and asked the cook to let him feel the difference between wheat flour and sugar between coarse salt and fine salt. In the garden, she taught him to identify plants by touch, the roughness of the jaboticaba tree trunk, the softness of rose petals, the thorny texture of the cactus near the gate. Gabriel began to open up. For the first time, he felt that someone saw him not as a tragedy, but as a complete person. Helen didn't speak with that artificially cheerful voice that some servants used with him. She treated him with respect, with firmness when necessary, with tenderness always. Marcus observed everything from a distance with a mixture of relief and discomfort. Relief because Gabriel seemed happier. Discomfort because this simple woman, seemingly from nowhere, was achieving something he, with all his power and money, had never accomplished, making his son genuinely smile. One afternoon, Helen brought a small wooden box she carried in her bag. Gabriel heard the sound of her fiddling with something and asked what it was. "These are some things my grandmother taught me," Helen explained. "Herbs, oils, old recipes, things that people in the countryside used before pharmacy medicines existed." Gabriel frowned. "My father has tried every remedy in the world. Nothing works." "No," Helen said calmly, "but sometimes what heals doesn't come from outside. It comes from within, and sometimes it needs a little help from things nature has already given us as a gift." She said nothing more that day. She simply put the box away again, but the seed was planted. Meanwhile, Marcus plunged deeper and deeper into his work. A new venture demanded all his attention. He was about to close the biggest deal of his career, an international partnership that would place him among the most powerful businessmen in the country. He spent entire nights on video conferences, weekends locked in his study. Gabriel barely saw him anymore, but the boy no longer felt that painful longing from before. Helen filled his days with discoveries. She taught him to recognize spices by smell, to identify music by rhythm, to perceive when someone was happy or sad just by their tone of voice. Gabriel absorbed everything with a thirst that surprised even himself. On a sunny February morning, Helen decided to do something different. She took Gabriel to the edge of the swimming pool, took off his shoes and dipped his feet in the warm water. "Have you ever swum?" she asked. "No," Gabriel replied with a thread of fear in his voice. "I'm afraid I won't know where I am." "I'll be right beside you the whole time. Do you trust me?" Gabriel hesitated. Trust was something he had learned not to give easily. But something about Helen was different. "I trust you," he finally said. And then, for the first time in his life, Gabriel entered the pool. Helen held him firmly, guiding his movements, teaching him to feel the resistance of the water, the strength of his own arms, the propulsion of his legs. When he finally managed to swim a few strokes on his own, he shouted with joy, a pure, childlike joy that had long been absent from that mansion. From his study window, Marcus observed the scene. He felt something tighten in his chest, a mixture of pride and shame, pride in his son, shame in himself. That night, after Gabriel was already asleep, Marcus went down to the kitchen to get water. He found Helen preparing chamomile tea, sitting at the table reading an old book. They exchanged brief greetings. Marcus was about to leave when Helen spoke. "Your son is an extraordinary boy." Marcus stopped. "I know that. But he needs you, not your money, you." The words landed like a punch. Marcus turned, ready to put that servant in her place. But when he saw Helen's expression, serene and free from judgment, the words died in his throat. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he finally said defensively. "Everything I do is to secure his future." "His future depends on who he becomes, not what he inherits," Helen retorted softly. "And who he becomes depends on the love he receives now." Marcus left the kitchen without answering. But Helen's words echoed in his mind for hours, keeping him awake. Meanwhile, Gabriel slept deeply, dreaming for the first time of colors he had never seen. In the dream, Helen guided him through a field full of flowers, each with a different scent. And on the horizon something glowed, a soft, warm, inviting light. He didn't know what it was, but he knew he wanted to reach it. And for the first time in his life, he believed he might be able to. The following weeks brought subtle but profound changes. Gabriel became increasingly independent. He learned to dress himself by feeling the textures of clothes, to eat without spilling food, by guiding himself by smell and the position of cutlery, to walk around the house with more confident steps. Helen was always nearby, but never intrusive. She offered help only when necessary, encouraged autonomy whenever possible. Marcus began to dine at home more frequently. He didn't state the reason, but deep down he knew Helen's words had struck a chord. He observed his son during meals, noticing details that had previously gone unnoticed, how Gabriel tilted his head when paying attention, how his fingers explored objects with delicate precision, how he smiled when he recognized a familiar voice. One evening, Marcus asked how Gabriel's day had been. The boy, surprised by the unusual question, began to recount his lessons with Helen, how he had learned to differentiate birds by their song, about the story she had read to him that afternoon. Marcus listened in silence, and when Gabriel finished, he merely said, "I'm glad you're learning so much." They were few words, but they meant the world to Gabriel. Helen maintained her discreet routine. She woke early, prepared Gabriel's breakfast, spent the day exploring the world with him, and at night retired to her room where she read old books and wrote letters to her family in the Lake District. The other servants respected her, but kept their distance. There was something about her that subtly intimidated them, a serene yet powerful presence, as if she carried secrets no one else knew, and indeed she did. In the small wooden box she kept in her bag, besides the herbs and oils she had mentioned, there was something more, a handmade ceramic pot sealed with beeswax. Inside it, a thick greenish balm smelling of rosemary, calendula, and other plants she herself had gathered and prepared according to recipes passed down by her grandmother, who in turn had learned from her great-grandmother, and so on, through generations of women who knew the powers of the earth. That balm was no ordinary remedy. It was prepared under a full moon, with whispered prayers, with intentions planted in every movement of her hand. It served to soothe old pains, to heal invisible wounds, to bring light where there was darkness. Helen knew that modern medicine would scoff at it. She knew that Marcus Alistair, with all his faith in science and technology, would never believe. But she also knew with a certainty that came from a place deeper than reason that this balm had a purpose. And that purpose was about to reveal itself. For now, she waited. She prepared Gabriel not only physically, but spiritually. She taught him to trust, to believe, to open his heart to possibilities that the rational world denied. Because she knew that true healing always began with faith, not blind faith, but the faith born of hope, cultivated with patience and love. And Gabriel unknowingly was already ready. His heart, once hardened by loneliness and despair, began to open like a flower finding the sun after a long, cruel winter. The transformation had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. March arrived, bringing intense rains that drenched the gardens of Alistair Manor. Gabriel loved stormy days. He would sit on the covered veranda, eyes closed, and let the sounds of nature invade his ears. The drumming of raindrops on the roof, the wind whistling through the trees, the smell of wet earth rising from the soil. Helen always sat beside him during these moments in respectful silence, just sharing the experience. It was on one of these rainy afternoons that something inexplicable happened. Gabriel was describing to Helen the sounds he could identify when, suddenly, he blinked several times in a row. His face contorted into an expression of confusion. Helen noticed immediately. "What is it, Gabriel?" she asked attentively. "I don't know," the boy replied, bringing his hands to his eyes. "I felt something different, like a flash, but it can't be. I've never seen anything." Helen felt her heart race, but kept her voice calm. "Describe it better for me. What exactly did you feel?" Gabriel hesitated, afraid he was imagining things. "It was quick, like when you're in complete darkness and someone strikes a match far away. You don't see the match, but you know there's a light there. It was like that, a tiny point of something different from the darkness." Helen held the boy's hands delicately. "That's wonderful, Gabriel. Your body is awakening. Don't be discouraged if it doesn't happen again soon. These things need time." But my father said it's impossible, Gabriel murmured, hope battling with years of disbelief. All the doctors said so. Doctors know what science has already discovered, but the human body holds mysteries that are not yet fully understood. Helen gently squeezed his hands. Let's believe together, okay? Gabriel nodded, but said nothing to his father. He was afraid of being ridiculed, of having his hope crushed by technical explanations and cold diagnoses. He kept that moment as a precious secret, shared only with Helen. The following days were of careful observation. Helen intensified the sensory exercises, but now with an additional purpose. She gently massaged Gabriel's temples with lavender and rosemary essential oils, taught him deep breathing exercises, guided him in simple meditations where he imagined light entering his body. Everything was done naturally, as part of daily activities without fanfare. Marcus, for his part, was increasingly absent. The big deal he had been preparing encountered unexpected obstacles. Partners proved disloyal, contracts needed renegotiation, lawyers worked day and night to resolve complex legal issues. The pressure was immense. He returned home late at night, locked himself in his study with piles of documents and bottles of whiskey, slept only a few hours, and woke up even more tense. Gabriel felt the absence, but this time differently. Before, his father's absence was like an open wound. Now, with Helen by his side, it was more like a gentle longing. He had learned that love wasn't measured by constant physical presence, but by the quality of shared moments. And during the rare dinners when Marcus managed to sit at the table, Gabriel cherished every minute, telling stories, asking questions, trying to build bridges over the abyss that separated them. One morning, Helen woke earlier than usual. The sun had not yet fully risen when she went down to the garden, carrying the small wooden box. She knelt on the damp earth near the jaboticaba tree and began to prepare something. She opened the ceramic pot with the sacred balm, added fresh white rose petals she had gathered from the garden, a few drops of dew she had collected from the leaves, and whispered ancient words her grandmother had taught her. It wasn't witchcraft. It wasn't magic in the profane sense. It was simply faith materialized in gestures. It was the belief that nature, when treated with respect and love, offered its gifts to those who knew how to ask. Helen didn't do it to impress anyone, nor did she expect recognition. She did it because she felt, deep in her soul, that it was the right path. When she finished, she put everything away carefully and returned to the house. Gabriel was already awake, sitting in bed, waiting for her. "Good morning, Mrs. Helen," he said with a smile. "I felt you left early." "How did you know?" she asked admiringly. "I missed you, and the smell of the house was different when you came back. You brought the scent of the garden roses." Helen chuckled softly. "You're getting more and more attentive, my boy. Shall we have breakfast?" During breakfast, Gabriel seemed restless. He fiddled with his food without eating much, turned his face from side to side as if searching for something. Helen watched in silence. Finally, the boy spoke. "Mrs. Helen, that feeling from yesterday, the flash, it happened again this morning, twice." Helen's heart pounded, but she maintained her serenity. "Tell me everything." "It happened when I woke up, and again a few minutes ago, here at the table. It's like something shining far away, inside the darkness. I can't explain it properly." Gabriel seemed confused and hopeful at the same time. Helen stood up, walked around the table and knelt beside Gabriel's chair. She took his hands in hers. "Gabriel, I need to ask you something very important. Do you trust me?" "I trust you," the boy replied without hesitation. "Then I'm going to ask you to keep believing. Don't tell your father yet. Not because it's a secret, but because some things need to grow in silence before they are exposed to the world. Do you understand?" Gabriel nodded slowly. "I understand. It's like a plant that needs time underground before it sprouts, right?" "Exactly," Helen confirmed with a smile in her voice. In the following days, the flashes became more frequent. Gabriel began to notice patterns. They happened mainly when he was relaxed, when he felt safe, when he was near Helen. Sometimes they were accompanied by a sensation of gentle warmth around his eyes, as if something was awakening after a very long sleep. Helen decided it was time to use the balm. One afternoon after lunch, she took Gabriel to his room and asked him to lie on the bed. "I'm going to give you a special massage around your eyes," she explained. "It will be with an oil I prepared. It might feel a little warm, but it won't hurt. You'll let me know if you feel any discomfort, okay?" "Okay," Gabriel agreed confidently. Helen dipped her fingers into the warm balm. The texture was creamy, the scent was soft and comforting. With delicate circular movements, she began to apply the product to Gabriel's eyelids, temples, and around his eye sockets. As she massaged, she whispered words of encouragement. "Your body knows how to heal. You are stronger than you imagine. The light is waiting for you." Gabriel felt a strange sensation. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was intense, as if something ancient within him was being awakened. A gentle tingling spread through the area around. His eyes then descended his neck across his chest until it dissolved into a feeling of deep peace. When Helen finished, the boy was almost asleep. "Rest now," she said softly, covering him with a light sheet. "I'll be here when you wake up." Gabriel slept for 3 consecutive hours, a rare occurrence for him, who always had restless sleep. When he woke, he felt different, lighter, more alive. And when he opened his eyes, he was absolutely certain that something had changed. The darkness was no longer the same. There were gradations in it, subtle tones, as if absolute. Black was beginning to fragment into various shades of grey. "Mrs. Helen," he called, his voice trembling with emotion. She was sitting in the armchair beside the bed, embroidering a handkerchief. "I'm here, my boy. I think I'm seeing differently. The darkness, it's not the same everywhere." Helen put her embroidery aside and approached. "That's wonderful, Gabriel. Your body is responding. Keep believing." "But what if it's just my imagination? What if I'm making it up because I want it to be true so badly?" Helen took his hand and placed it over her own heart. "Do you feel my heart beating?" Gabriel nodded. "That's not imagination, it's real. In the same way, what you're feeling in your eyes is also real. Don't let fear steal your hope." Gabriel hugged Helen tightly, as he had never hugged anyone, and for the first time in many years, he cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of a hope that finally dared to exist. Meanwhile, in Marcus's study, things were falling apart. The deal that was supposed to be the crowning achievement of his career had collapsed. International investors pulled out, partners broke the agreement, contracts were cancelled, millions of pounds invested turned to dust. Marcus sat in his leather chair surrounded by useless documents and for the first time in decades allowed himself to taste the bitter flavour of failure. He called home asking for dinner to be prepared. He needed to be with Gabriel. He needed something to remind him that not everything in his life was about money and power. When he arrived at the mansion, he found Gabriel and Helen in the garden. The boy was laughing as Helen described the shapes of the clouds passing across the sky. Marcus stopped, at the glass door of the living room, observing the scene. He felt a pang of envy. That simple woman, without fortune, without titles, without anything he considered important, had achieved something he had never accomplished. She had won his son's true trust and affection. They dined together that night. Marcus, Gabriel, and Helen, whom Marcus insisted sit at the table with them. The conversation was calm. Gabriel talked about the day's lessons, about the new sounds he had learned to identify, about the book Helen was reading to him. Marcus listened more than he spoke, a rarity for a man accustomed to dominating any environment. At the end of dinner, when Gabriel had already gone up to his room, Marcus and Helen were left alone in the living room. He poured himself a whiskey, offered her something, which she gently refused. They sat in silence for a few minutes until Marcus spoke. "The deal I was preparing, it failed. I lost a lot of money. A lot." Helen showed neither surprise nor pity. "Money comes back. Time doesn't." Marcus laughed humorlessly. "You have an answer for everything, don't you? I don't have answers. I only have what life has taught me." "And what has life taught you about me?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "That you are a man with fear, Fear of failing, fear of disappointing, fear of not being enough. And that fear keeps you away from the only thing that truly matters. Helen spoke softly, without accusation. Marcus felt the words like a punch to the stomach. He wanted to retort, to defend himself, but he couldn't, because he knew she was right. "I don't know how to be different," he finally admitted, his voice low. "I don't know how to be the father he needs. No, one is born knowing. We learn by making mistakes, trying again, making different mistakes, trying once more." Helen leaned slightly forward. "But you need to be present to learn. You need to be willing to take risks." Marcus finished his whiskey in one gulp. "I'll try." That's all he needs, for you to try. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Helen had said, thinking about all the opportunities he had let slip away, all the moments with Gabriel he had exchanged for meetings and contracts. He decided something had to change. He didn't know exactly how, but he knew it had to happen. Meanwhile, in Gabriel's room, the boy was also awake. The flashes now came with more intensity and frequency. He could tell when he was near a window because the luminosity was different. He could feel when someone passed between him and a light source because the shadow altered the tone of the darkness. These were tiny advances for any ordinary person, but for someone who had lived 9 years in total darkness, they were miracles. Helen prayed in her room, kneeling beside her bed, giving thanks for the blessings that were beginning to manifest and asking for wisdom to guide Gabriel along the path that was opening before him. She knew the most difficult part was yet to come, because the true test would not be Gabriel's physical healing, but Marcus's emotional healing. And that was a battle she couldn't fight alone. Days turned into weeks. April brought milder weather, clear skies, and blooming gardens. Gabriel continued his daily sessions with Helen, who applied the balm regularly, always accompanied by massages, visualization exercises, and encouraging conversations. The results were undeniable now. Gabriel could perceive light and shadow clearly. He began to distinguish blurry shapes. He saw patches of colors when Helen placed colorful flowers near his face. Marcus had also changed, not overnight, but gradually. He cancelled some trips, delegated more responsibilities to his managers, and came home in time for dinner with Gabriel almost every night. Conversations between father and son were still awkward, full of pauses and silences, but there was genuine effort from both sides. One afternoon, Gabriel asked his father to accompany him to the garden. "I want to show you something," he said with barely contained excitement. Marcus agreed, intrigued. They walked side by side, Helen following a few steps behind. When they reached the pool, Gabriel stopped. "Dad, look at this." And then, to Marcus's astonishment, the boy pointed to the water. "I can see the sparkle. I don't see the whole pool, but I see there's something shining there." Marcus felt his legs weaken. This wasn't possible. All the doctors had been categorical. Blindness was irreversible. "How are you doing this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "It's Mrs. Helen," Gabriel replied simply. "She's helping me. She's healing me." Marcus turned to Helen, who remained serene. "What are you doing to my son?" he asked, caught between fear and hope. "Just helping him find the light that has always been within him." But the doctors said it was impossible. Marcus was visibly shaken. "Medicine knows a lot, but it doesn't know everything." Helen stepped forward. "Sometimes the body needs more than medicine. It needs love, faith, care. It needs to be seen as a whole, not just as a set of defective parts." Marcus sat on a nearby bench, needing to process it all. Gabriel approached and touched his father's arm. "Aren't you happy?" the boy asked, concerned. "I'm happier than you can imagine, son." Marcus pulled Gabriel into a hug. "I'm just trying to understand how this is possible." "Faith doesn't need explanation. It just needs an open heart," Helen said softly. Marcus looked at her over Gabriel's head. In the eyes of that simple woman, he saw a certainty he had never possessed, a quiet strength that didn't come from diplomas or bank accounts, but from something much deeper and older. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Alistair felt small, not in a humiliating way, but in a liberating way, as if he could finally admit that he didn't know everything, that he didn't control everything, that he needed help. That night, after Gabriel was asleep, Marcus sought out Helen. He found her in the kitchen, preparing lemon balm tea. "Sit down," she offered, pouring a cup for him as well. Marcus obeyed. He stirred his tea for a few moments before speaking. "You are doing something miraculous with my son, something I could never achieve, and I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me. You just need to keep being a father. It's the only thing Gabriel truly wants from you." Marcus nodded, but there was something else he needed to ask. "This treatment you're doing, is it safe? Are there any risks?" Helen took a sip of tea before answering. "There is nothing in what I use that can cause harm. They are just natural herbs, essential oils, things the earth gives us. But what is healing Gabriel is not just that. It's the combination of everything, the love, the attention, his own faith, the awakening of his own body. I am just an instrument." "But do you have any training? Did you study alternative medicine?" "I learned from my grandmother, who learned from hers. These are ancient knowledges passed down from generation to generation. I don't have certificates on the wall, if that's what you're asking, but I have results. And I have genuine love for your son." Marcus was silent for a long moment. Finally, he extended his hand across the table. "Thank you, Helen, truly, for everything." She squeezed his hand firmly. "Your son deserves every chance to be happy, and so do you." When Marcus went to sleep that night, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. A fragile peace still, but real. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, things could truly change, that miracles could happen not just in stories, but there, in that cold mansion that was finally beginning to warm with something more precious than all the gold in the world. True love, renewed hope, faith in the impossible. May arrived, bringing cold mornings and sunny afternoons. Gabriel's transformation continued at a steady pace, each day bringing small advances that added up to great achievements. The boy could now distinguish shapes more clearly, identified vibrant colors, recognized faces when people approached closely enough. It was not yet perfect vision, but it was infinitely more than he had ever imagined possible. Marcus observed everything with a mixture of fascination and unease. The part of him that loved his son vibrated with every progress, but the proud part, accustomed to being in control, felt threatened. After all the specialists he had hired, all the expensive equipment he had bought, all the cutting-edge clinics he had visited, none of it had produced results. And now a simple nanny from the countryside with her herbs and prayers was achieving the impossible. One morning during breakfast, Marcus made a decision. "Gabriel, I'm going to make an appointment with Dr. Forrester. I want him to examine your eyes again." Gabriel stopped eating, tense. "Why? Everything's fine. I'm getting better." "Precisely because of that. We need to understand what's happening, from a medical point of view." Marcus tried to sound calm, but there was a firmness in his voice that brooked no discussion. Helen, who was serving juice, gently intervened. "Mr. Alistair, perhaps it's better to let the process take its natural course. Invasive medical examinations can hinder it." "With all due respect, Helen, but this is a matter between me and my son," Marcus replied with a coldness he hadn't used in weeks. "I need scientific answers. I need to understand if what's happening is real or temporary." "It is real, Dad," Gabriel said vehemently. "I know it's real." "Then there's no problem confirming it with a doctor, is there?" Marcus ended the subject. The appointment was scheduled for the following week. Gabriel spent the next few days visibly anxious. He was afraid that the exams would show that nothing had changed, that it was all his imagination. He was afraid that the doctors would mock him, as they had indirectly done so many times over the years, with their merciless diagnoses and absolute certainties. Helen continued the treatment, but she noticed the growing tension. Gabriel was less receptive, more withdrawn. Fear was blocking his progress. One night, sitting on the edge of his bed, she held his hands and spoke tenderly. "It doesn't matter what the doctors say. You know what you're feeling. You know what you're seeing. No one can take that away from you." But what if they say nothing has changed, that the nerves are still damaged? Then their instruments aren't sensitive enough to measure. What's happening? Science has its limits. That doesn't make your experience any less true. Gabriel hugged Helen, seeking solace. I'm afraid of losing everything again. You won't lose. Not if we're together. Helen stroked his hair. We have to have faith, even when everything seems to be against us. The day of the appointment dawned cloudy. Marcus, Gabriel and Helen went together to the clinic of Dr. Henry Forrester, one of London's most renowned ophthalmologists. The office was in a modern building on Bond Street, all glass and steel, with a spacious reception area and minimalist decor. Dr. Forrester was a man in his 60s, with perfectly combed grey hair, an immaculate lab coat and expensive framed glasses. He greeted Marcus with familiarity. They had met a few times over the years, always with the same disheartening result. When he saw Gabriel, he forced a professional smile. "And so, young man, your father tells me you're experiencing changes in your vision." "I'm not experiencing, I'm seeing," Gabriel corrected with unusual firmness. The doctor exchanged a glance with Marcus, who remained neutral. "Well, let's examine you and find out what's happening. Gabriel, I need you to sit in that chair." The exams began. Intense lights were directed at Gabriel's eyes, which blinked uncomfortably. Sophisticated machines scanned his retinas. Drops were administered to dilate his pupils. Reflex tests were performed. Gabriel answered all the questions, describing what he could see, how he could distinguish shapes and colors. Dr. Forrester maintained a professional expression throughout the process, but Helen, observing from the chair next to Marcus, perceived the skepticism in his every movement. After almost 2 hours of examinations, the doctor asked Gabriel to wait in the waiting room while he spoke with Marcus in his office. Helen took Gabriel to the reception, sat beside him, and held his hand. She took a few deep breaths, trying to calm her own racing heart. In the office, Dr. Forrester got straight to the point. "Marcus, the exams show no significant change. The optic nerves still have the same damage as always. There is no visible regeneration, no structural alteration that would justify an improvement in vision." Marcus felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. "But he is seeing. I witnessed it myself. He identifies colors, points to objects." The doctor sighed, choosing his words carefully. "It's possible he has developed a very sophisticated sensory compensation. The brain is capable of impressive things when properly trained. He might be using other senses to create the illusion of sight, or it could be a very powerful placebo effect, reinforced by whoever is treating him." Marcus felt anger rise. "It's not an illusion. It's not a placebo. My son is seeing." Dr. Forrester leaned across the table. "Marcus, we've known each other for years. You've always been a rational man. Don't let unrealistic hopes harm your son's well-being. If someone is promising miraculous cures, you need to be very careful. There are people who take advantage of the desperation of families like yours." The words fell like bombs. Marcus stood up abruptly. "I'm getting a second opinion. Feel free. But all serious specialists will tell you the same thing. The damage is irreversible." Dr. Forrester also stood up. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I know how much you wanted a different outcome." When Marcus left the office, his face was a mask of granite. Gabriel stood up immediately upon seeing him. "So, Dad, what did he say?" Marcus looked at his son, then at Helen. "Let's go home. We'll talk there." The drive back was tense, in silence. Gabriel felt the weight of disappointment in the air, but didn't know exactly what had happened. Helen remained serene, but inside she prayed fervently. As soon as they arrived at the mansion, Marcus went straight to the point. He gathered Gabriel and Helen in the living room. "The exams showed no improvement. According to Dr. Forrester, there's no physical change that justifies what Gabriel says he's seeing." Gabriel paled. "But I am seeing. I swear I am." Marcus ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "I want to believe, but I need concrete proof. I need another doctor to examine you. I'll schedule appointments with more specialists." Helen stepped forward. "Mr. Alistair, with all due respect, the machines only measure what they are programmed to measure. There are aspects of healing that science doesn't yet fully understand. Are you saying the doctors are wrong? Marcus asked, his voice laden with tension. I'm saying they are limited by their own instruments. The human body is more complex than any machine can capture. Marcus felt frustration overflow. You know what I think? I think you've created an illusion in my son's mind. You made him believe in something that isn't real. And now, he's going to suffer when the truth becomes inevitable. Dad, don't talk to her like that, Gabriel protested, tears in his eyes. Mrs. Helen has helped me more than any doctor. Helped how? By giving false hopes. Marcus was losing control. Do you think I haven't tried everything? Do you think I haven't invested fortunes looking for a cure? And now some random person appears with herbs and empty promises. They're not empty promises, Gabriel shouted, his voice cracking. I know what I'm seeing. I know it's real. Helen kept her voice calm despite the storm around her. Mr. Alistair, I understand your concern. I know it's difficult to accept something that challenges everything you know, but Gabriel isn't lying, and I'm not deceiving anyone. Marcus turned to her, his eyes burning. Then prove it to me. Show me concrete evidence, because so far all I have are pretty words and a medical exam that says nothing has changed. The evidence is before your eyes. Gabriel is happier, more confident, more independent. Doesn't that count? That could be natural development. It could be maturity. It doesn't prove he's seeing. Gabriel sobbed. You don't believe me. Not even you believe me. The words pierced Marcus like arrows. He looked at his son, saw the tears streaming down his face, saw the pain etched in every feature. He felt his heart clench, but his pride was stronger. I believe that you believe, son. But I need more than faith. I need facts. Helen took another step, placing herself between father and son. Then let me continue the treatment. Give it more time. If in a few weeks there are no evident improvements that even the doctors can confirm, I'll stop and leave. But don't interrupt now. Don't take away the chance Gabriel finally has. Marcus remained silent for long seconds, his mind swirling. Finally, he nodded stiffly. 2 weeks. I'll give it 2 weeks. If there are no concrete, proven changes, you stop this treatment, and I'll seek psychological help for Gabriel, because clearly there's some dangerous placebo effect happening. Helen nodded, knowing it was the most she could get at the moment. Marcus left the room without another word. Gabriel ran to his room, sobbing. Helen followed him, finding him lying on the bed, his face buried in the pillow. She sat beside him, stroking his back. He doesn't believe me, Gabriel cried. My own father doesn't believe. He believes. He's just afraid. Afraid that it's not real. Afraid of being disappointed again. Adults sometimes need more time to accept miracles. But what if he's right? What if I'm just imagining? Helen gently turned Gabriel, making him sit up. She looked directly into his eyes. Describe to me what you're seeing now. Gabriel blinked, wiping his tears. I see you. Your face. Not perfectly, but I see it. Your eyes are brown. Your hair, too. You're wearing that blue blouse I like. And that's correct. Everything you said is correct. This isn't imagination. Helen held his face tenderly. Your father is scared because you're achieving something he couldn't with all his money. That shakes his pride. But he will understand. We just need a little more time. In the following days, the tension in the mansion was palpable. Marcus barely spoke to Helen, limiting himself to cold greetings when they crossed paths in the corridors. Gabriel became quieter, less spontaneous, afraid of showing enthusiasm and being disbelieved again. Helen continued the treatment in silence, applying the balm, giving massages, whispering encouragements. But something started to go wrong. The emotional pressure was taking its toll. Gabriel, who had been progressing consistently, began to regress. Colors seemed less vibrant. Shapes became blurrier. Some days the darkness returned with terrifying force. The boy spent hours in silence, touching objects with his hands as he had before, trying to orient himself solely by touch. Helen knew what was happening. The stress was blocking the healing process. Doubt, fear, lack of support, all of it formed a barrier that even the most powerful balm couldn't penetrate. She tried to talk to Marcus, to explain that Gabriel needed an emotionally safe environment to continue improving. But Marcus interpreted the regression as proof that he had been right all along. 1 week after the appointment with Dr. Forrester, the inevitable happened. Gabriel was descending the main staircase of the mansion alone. He used to do this every day, counting the steps, holding the banister. But that day, emotionally disturbed, he lost concentration. He misjudged the distance, stepped into the air where he thought there was solid ground, and fell. It was a bad fall. He tumbled down the last 5 steps, hitting his shoulder and head. His cry of pain echoed throughout the entire house. Servants ran from all sides. Helen, who was in the garden, rushed in. Marcus, who was in his study, dashed down the stairs. They found Gabriel lying on the marble floor, groaning in pain, holding his arm. Marcus knelt beside him, his face pale with fright. "Son, are you all right? Where does it hurt?" "My arm, my head." Gabriel cried copiously, more from fear and frustration than from physical pain. Helen tried to approach, but Marcus pushed her away with a brusque gesture. "Stay away from him." "Mr. Alistair, I just want to help." "You've helped enough." Marcus carefully picked Gabriel up in his arms. "I'm taking him to the hospital, and when we get back you're going to stop this ridiculous treatment. It's over." Gabriel clung to his father, sobbing. "It wasn't her fault. It was mine. I wasn't paying attention." "It was her fault. Yes. She made you believe you could see, and look what happened. You almost seriously hurt yourself." Marcus was beside himself, his voice trembling with anger and fear. Helen took a step back, tears finally welling in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted any of this to happen." Marcus didn't reply. He left carrying Gabriel, shouting orders for the car to be prepared. In minutes they were on their way to the hospital, leaving Helen alone in the hall, kneeling on the floor, crying silently. The servants watched from a distance, some with pity, others with the satisfaction of those who always knew that story wouldn't end well. Mrs. Carmen, the cook, approached and helped Helen up. "Come, dear. Come have some tea." At the hospital, Gabriel was examined. Nothing serious. Abrasions, a bruise on his shoulder, a small bump on his head. The doctor recommended rest and cold compresses. Marcus thanked him, relieved. But inside he felt a fury he couldn't control. On the way back home, Gabriel tried to speak. "Dad, please don't send Mrs. Helen away." "I'm not discussing this now," Marcus cut in dryly. "But it was my fault. I was distracted. It has nothing to do with the treatment." "Gabriel, you almost killed yourself because you believed you could see when you can't. This needs to stop." Marcus parked the car in the garage, turned off the engine, and turned to his son. "I'm going to get professional help. Psychologists, therapists, qualified people, not healers with magic herbs." "She's not a healer," Gabriel shouted, his voice filled with despair. "She helped me be happy for the first time in my life. She gave me hope." "False hope." Marcus got out of the car, walked around, and helped Gabriel out. "And false hope is worse than no hope." When they entered the mansion, Helen was waiting for them in the hall. There was a small suitcase at her feet. Marcus stopped, surprised. "What is this?" "I'm leaving," Helen said with dignity, despite the tears that glistened in her eyes. "I don't want to cause any more problems. I just wanted to say goodbye to Gabriel." Marcus nodded stiffly. 5 minutes. Helen knelt in front of Gabriel, who immediately threw himself into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Don't go. Please don't go." "I have to go, my boy. But you'll be all right." Helen stroked his hair. "You are strong, you are brave, and everything you've achieved, everything you've learned, no one can take from you. I don't want you to go. You're the only person who understands me. Your father loves you. He's just afraid. Give him time." Helen kissed Gabriel's forehead. "And never stop believing, even when everything seems impossible. Never. Let anyone steal your light." Gabriel held her tightly, as if he could prevent her from leaving through the intensity of the embrace. Helen reciprocated, etching that moment into her memory, feeling her heart shatter into 1,000,000 pieces. When they finally let go, she picked up her suitcase, looked one last time at Gabriel, then at Marcus. Take good care of him. That's all I ask." Marcus didn't reply. He just watched as Helen walked towards the door. She opened it, gave one last look at the mansion that had been her home for a few months and left, gently closing the door behind her. Gabriel stood in the middle of the hall, tears silently streaming down his face. He felt the darkness return with full force, swallowing even the small lights he had gained. It wasn't physical darkness. It was worse. It was the darkness of the soul, the darkness that comes when hope is brutally torn away. "You took my light," he said to his father, his voice low but laden with such deep pain that it cut Marcus like a razor. And then Gabriel slowly climbed the stairs, holding the banister, each step heavy as lead. He entered his room and closed the door. Marcus was left alone in the immense hall, surrounded by all the wealth he had built, and for the first time in his adult life, he crumbled. He sat on the cold marble floor and cried. He cried for the wife he had lost, for the son he was losing, for himself, and for the mess he had made of everything. He cried until he had no more tears. The days that followed Helen's departure were the darkest the Alistair Manor had ever known. Gabriel locked himself in his world of darkness, refusing to leave his room, barely touching the food brought to him. He spent hours sitting near the window, his back to the door, listening to the sounds of the garden he had once explored with such enthusiasm. Now, everything sounded empty, meaningless, as if color had been drained not just from his sight, but from life itself. Marcus tried to talk to him several times a day, but Gabriel responded in monosyllables or simply remained silent. The distance between father and son, which had been slowly diminishing, now seemed an insurmountable abyss. Marcus hired a new caregiver, a professional, nurse with excellent references, but Gabriel treated her with icy politeness, accepting only the minimum necessary help. At night, Marcus heard muffled sobs coming from his son's room and felt his chest tighten until he couldn't breathe. He tried to work, to immerse himself in business as he always had when his personal life became unbearable, but he couldn't concentrate. The numbers on the spreadsheets blurred before his eyes. The meetings seemed endless and pointless. Nothing made sense anymore. On the third night after Helen's departure, Marcus was in his study when he heard a noise coming from upstairs. A dull thud, followed by silence. He rushed upstairs and found Gabriel fallen in the corridor, trying to get up by himself. The boy had tried to go to the bathroom without asking for help, but had tripped on a rug that had always been there. Marcus helped him up carefully. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Gabriel replied in a lifeless voice. "I just forgot where the rug was." "Gabriel, you need to ask for help. You can't just walk around alone like this." "I could before, when she was here." The words were simple, but they carried a devastating accusation. Marcus felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. He took Gabriel back to his room, helped him lie down. He sat on the edge of the bed for a few minutes, searching for words that wouldn't come. "Son, I just wanted to protect you." "Protect me from what? From the only person who made me happy?" Gabriel turned his face away, refusing to continue the conversation. Marcus left the room with a heavy heart. He went down to the living room, poured himself a whiskey, and sat in the dark. Gabriel's words echoed in his mind. Helen's words too, and that phrase his son had said on the day of the fall, which haunted him like a ghost. "You took my light." It was then that Marcus realized, with painful clarity, what he had done. He hadn't expelled Helen because he didn't believe Gabriel was improving. He had expelled her because she had achieved something he had never accomplished, making his son truly happy. He had expelled her because his pride couldn't bear to admit that a simple woman, without diplomas or fortunes, was more important to Gabriel than he was. The truth fell upon Marcus like an avalanche. He had been selfish, cowardly. He had let fear and vanity speak louder than love, and now he was paying the highest possible price. He was losing his son. Not to blindness, but to sadness, to hopelessness, to the darkness of the soul that was much worse than the darkness of the eyes. He spent the entire night awake, staring into the void, confronting truths he had spent his life avoiding. When the sun rose, Marcus had already made a decision. He found Mrs. Carman in the kitchen preparing breakfast, The cook was one of the oldest employees, having worked in the house since before Gabriel was born. "Carmen, do you know where Helen went?" he asked directly. The woman hesitated. "I don't know for sure, sir, but I heard her mentioning to one of the cleaning girls that she had a sister living in Croydon. Maybe she went there. Do you have any more information, address, phone number?" Mrs. Carmen went to her room and returned with a piece of paper. "I wrote down the phone number she left, just in case we needed to talk to her about something concerning Gabriel." Marcus took the paper, as if it were the most precious object in the world. "Thank you, Carmen, from the bottom of my heart." "Mr. Alistair," the cook said with unusual courage, "that young lady was special. I saw it in her eyes. I don't know what she did, if it was medicine or prayer, but I know it was good for the boy. I never saw Gabriel as happy as he was with her around." "I know," Marcus admitted, his voice hoarse. "I know that now." He went up to his room and picked up his phone. He dialed the number, his fingers trembling slightly. It rang 3 times before a voice answered. "Hello? Helen, it's Marcus Alistair." There was a silence on the other end. "Mr. Alistair, has something happened to Gabriel?" "He's fine. Physically, but emotionally." Marcus ran a hand over his face. "Helen, I made a terrible mistake. I need you to come back." Another silence, longer this time. "I don't think that's a good idea. I've caused enough problems already." "The problems were caused by me. By my pride, my fear, my inability to accept that I didn't have all the answers." Marcus sat on the bed. "My son is broken. He doesn't eat, he doesn't speak, he doesn't want to live. And I finally understood that it wasn't just his sight you were giving back to him. It was his will to live, his hope, his joy. And I took all that from him, because I was too cowardly to admit that you succeeded where I never could. Mr. Alistair, it wasn't a competition. I know, but my pride turned it into one." Marcus took a deep breath. "Please come back. Not for me, for Gabriel. He needs you." Helen took a moment to respond. When she spoke, her voice was choked. "And you, sir? Do you still think it's all an illusion, that I'm deceiving your son?" "I don't know what it is. I don't understand how it works. But I saw my son happy. I saw him confident. I saw him alive in a way he never was before. And if that's an illusion, then it's the most beautiful and true illusion there is." Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. "You may not have a diploma on the wall, but you have something no doctor I've ever met had. You have true love for my son. And I realized too late that it's worth more than any certificate." Helen cried on the other end of the line. She was silent for long seconds. "I'll come back. But on one condition. Anything. You need to trust. Trust the process, trust me, and most importantly, trust Gabriel. No doubts, no interferences, no doctors questioning every step forward. I need you to believe." Marcus closed his eyes. "I believe. I swear I believe. Then I'll be there in 2 hours." When Marcus hung up the phone, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. He rushed down to Gabriel's room, knocked on the door. "Son, can I come in?" "Yes," came the apathetic reply. Marcus entered and sat on the bed. Gabriel was lying on his side, his back to the door. "I have some news. I don't want to hear about new doctors or therapists. It's not about that." Marcus gently touched his son's shoulder. "I called Helen. She's coming back." Gabriel turned so quickly he almost fell off the bed. "What? Is it true?" "It's true. I asked her to come back. I begged her, actually." Tears began to stream down Gabriel's face. "Do you believe her now? Do you believe me?" Marcus pulled his son into a hug. "I believe. And I ask for your forgiveness for taking so long to understand. I ask for your forgiveness for letting my fears speak louder than my love. I ask for your forgiveness for taking away your light." Gabriel hugged his father tightly, crying on his shoulder. "You didn't take it, Dad. It's still here. It was just hidden, waiting." The 2 hours seemed an eternity. Gabriel bathed, combed his hair, put on clean clothes. He was unrecognizable compared to the last few days. Marcus had Helen's room prepared exactly as it was before, with fresh flowers on the dresser. All the servants were instructed to treat her with the utmost respect. When the intercom rang announcing Helen's arrival, Gabriel ran to the main door with an energy he hadn't shown in days. Marcus followed more slowly, his heart pounding. Helen entered through the gate with her simple suitcase, her same soft steps. When Gabriel heard the door open, he shouted her name and ran towards the voice. Helen dropped her suitcase and opened her arms just in time to receive the impact of the boy throwing himself against her. She held him tightly, kissing the top of his head repeatedly, tears streaming freely. "You came back. You really came back," Gabriel sobbed with joy. "I came back, my boy. And I'm never leaving again. I promise." Marcus approached, stopping at a respectful distance. Helen looked at him over Gabriel's head. Their eyes met, and in that moment all unspoken words were understood. Marcus nodded slowly, a silent plea for forgiveness. Helen returned a small, gentle smile, a silent offer of a new beginning. "Welcome back," Marcus said simply. "Thank you for calling me back," she replied. That day, Alistair Manor began to breathe again. Gabriel didn't leave Helen's side for a minute, following her everywhere, telling her everything that had happened in the last few days, reaffirming 1,000 times that he was sorry for falling, that it hadn't been her fault. Helen listened patiently, stroking his hair, assuring him that none of that mattered now. That night, after Gabriel finally slept, emotionally exhausted but happy, Helen and Marcus talked in the living room. He offered her tea, which she accepted. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, finally, "for everything, for doubting you, for being arrogant, for hurting my son because of my pride. You were scared, it's natural." Helen took a sip of tea. "I understand. It must be difficult to see an outsider achieve something you tried to reach for years." "It doesn't justify my behavior." Marcus looked at the cup in his hands. "I spent my life believing that money and power could solve everything. I discovered in the most painful way possible that the most important things cannot be bought." Helen nodded. "Gabriel doesn't need wealth. He needs presence, love, someone who believes in him." "I will be present from now on. I will believe. Even when I don't understand, I will believe." Marcus raised his eyes to her. "And I will support your treatment, without questions, without interferences." "Thank you. That means a lot." From that day on, everything changed. Helen resumed the treatment with renewed purpose. She applied the balm daily, always accompanied by words of encouragement and whispered prayers. Gabriel absorbed everything with deep gratitude, and gradually the advances began again. First slowly, like someone recovering strength after a long illness, then with more speed and consistency. Marcus kept his word. He cancelled meetings to have lunch with Gabriel. He delegated responsibilities to get home in time for dinner. On weekends, he sat in the garden beside his son and Helen, just sharing their presence. He didn't fully understand the healing process, couldn't scientifically explain how it worked, but he saw the results before his eyes, and that was enough. 2 weeks after Helen's return, Gabriel woke with a different sensation. He opened his eyes, and for the first time in his life saw not blurry flashes, not undefined shadows, but clear images. He saw the ceiling of his room, the dark wooden beams, the crystal chandelier. He turned his head and saw the window, the sunlight streaming in golden rays. He sat up in bed and looked at his own hands, marveling. He stood up, swaying, not from lack of sight, but from overwhelming emotion. He opened the bedroom door and looked down the immense corridor, seeing for the first time the paintings on the walls, the rug that had caused his fall, the doors of each room. He descended the stairs slowly, holding the banister not out of necessity but precaution, his eyes scanning every detail. He found Helen in the kitchen, talking with Mrs. Carman. When she turned and their eyes met, Gabriel stopped in the middle of the room. "You," he said with a trembling voice, "you are exactly as I imagined, and even more beautiful." Helen brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes wide. "Gabriel, are you seeing me?" "I'm seeing everything." Gabriel spun in a circle, laughing and crying at the same time. "I see the chairs, the table, the pots hanging. I see the colors, yellow, blue, red, everything. I see everything." Helen ran and hugged him tightly. Mrs. Carmen brought her. Hands to her chest, moved. Thank God. Blessed be. What's going on here? Marcus's voice came from the doorway. He had come down upon hearing the commotion. Gabriel turned and for the first time saw his father's face. He saw the brown eyes so similar to his own, the expression lines around his mouth, the grey hairs at his temples. Dad, he said, his voice breaking, I can see you. Marcus froze. How? Gabriel walked towards him with firm steps. You're wearing a dark blue suit, a striped tie. Your eyes are brown, you have a small scar on your left eyebrow. Gabriel stopped in front of his father, extended his hand and gently touched the scar. How did you get that mark? Marcus was trembling. Playing football when I was 17. No one ever asked about it. Now I can see. I can see everything. Gabriel smiled through his tears. Marcus pulled his son into a desperate hug, sobbing openly. Forgive me. Forgive me for doubting, for being so stubborn, for almost letting this slip away. You don't need to ask for forgiveness, Dad. You came around. You brought her back. Gabriel hugged him tightly. You gave me back. My light. It wasn't me, it was her. Marcus looked at Helen over Gabriel's shoulder. It was always her. Helen watched the scene with tears streaming down her face, but there was a serene smile on her lips. A smile of someone witnessing a miracle she helped create not through magic, but through love, patience, and unwavering faith. Later that day, Marcus gathered all the servants in the garden. Helen was beside him, with Gabriel holding her hand. Marcus cleared his throat before speaking, his voice emotional but firm. I want everyone to witness this moment. My son, who was born unable to see, today can see perfectly. Doctors said it was impossible. Science claimed there was no cure. But it happened. And it happened thanks to this extraordinary woman. Helen not only healed my son's eyes, she healed our hearts. She taught me that there are powers in this world that go beyond what we can measure or buy, and for that, I will be eternally grateful. He turned to Helen and, to everyone's surprise, knelt before her. The servants gasped. Marcus Alistair, the proudest man they knew, was on his knees. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, thank you, for not giving up on my son when I did, for believing when I doubted, for bringing light where I only saw darkness. Marcus took Helen's hand. You will always have a place in this house, not as an employee, but as family. Helen helped him up gently. I didn't do anything alone. I did it because I love Gabriel, and because I believe that miracles happen when we unite faith, love, and the will to heal. Gabriel hugged both of them, creating a circle of affection that was finally complete. The servants applauded, many with tears in their eyes, witnessing the transformation not only of a blind boy who regained his sight, but of a shattered family that rebuilt itself. That afternoon, Gabriel ran through the garden for the first time, seeing where he stepped. He saw the jaboticaba trees he had only known by touch, the roses he had only known by their scent, the birds he had only known by their song. He spun with open arms, looking at the infinitely blue sky, and shouted with all the strength of his lungs, I can see, I can see. His voice echoed across the property, a hymn of victory, a song of joy, a declaration that miracles exist. Not always in the way we expect, not always in the time we desire, but they exist for those who dare to believe. Marcus and Helen watched from a distance, side by side. Do you really believe it was the balm? Marcus asked softly. Or was it something greater? It was everything together. The balm, the prayers, the love, Gabriel's own faith, your decision to bring me back. Helen looked at him. True healing never comes from a single source. It comes from the union of many forces working in harmony. Nature offered the herbs. My grandmother taught me how to prepare them. I offered the care. Gabriel offered the trust. And you, in the end, offered the most important thing of all. What? Humility to admit you were wrong. Courage to change. Love enough to put your son's well-being above your pride. Without that, nothing else would have worked. Marcus nodded slowly, letting the words sink in deeply. He looked at his son running freely, his laughter filling the air, and felt his chest overflow with gratitude. He had lost many things throughout his life. Lost. His wife lost precious years with his son, lost himself in pursuit of riches that never brought true happiness. But now, finally, he had found what truly mattered. That night, for the first time in 9 years, Gabriel saw the stars. Helen and Marcus took him to the mansion's terrace, a spacious area with panoramic views of the sky. The three lay on soft blankets, looking up at the universe above. "There are so many," Gabriel whispered in wonder. "I never imagined there were so many." "Each one has a story," Helen said softly. "Each one shines in its own way." "Just like every person," Marcus added, glancing at Helen. "Some shine brighter. Some illuminate paths that seemed impossible to traverse." They stayed there for hours, Gabriel asking questions about constellations, about planets, about everything his hungry eyes could finally see. Helen answered with infinite patience, pointing out stars, drawing shapes in the sky. Marcus simply watched, etching every second into his memory, knowing that this was one of those moments that define an entire life. When they finally went inside, Gabriel was exhausted but radiant. Before going to sleep, he hugged Helen once more. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when everyone else did. I would never give up on you. Never." Helen kissed his forehead. "Now rest. Tomorrow, there's a whole world waiting to be seen." After Gabriel fell asleep, Helen went to the garden, carrying the small wooden box. She knelt under the jaboticaba tree, opened the ceramic pot, and looked at the balm that was now almost empty. She whispered words of gratitude to her grandmother, to all the women who came before her, guardians of ancient knowledge that modern medicine had not yet reached. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. Marcus approached slowly. "May I sit?" he asked. "Of course." They sat in silence for a few moments, just listening to the crickets and the wind in the leaves. "What will you do now?" Marcus asked. "Now that Gabriel is healed?" "Continue caring for him. Not just his eyes, but his heart. Help him grow strong, brave, kind." Helen carefully closed the box. "And perhaps, if you allow, help other people. There are many who suffer not from illnesses that doctors can treat, but from wounds that only love can heal. You will always have my support for any project you wish to undertake." Marcus hesitated before continuing. "And not just financial support, but my presence, my work, if you want it." Helen smiled in the dark. "It would be an honor." And so, under the stars that Gabriel could finally see, under the jaboticaba tree that had witnessed so many transformations, a new alliance was formed, not of employer and employee, but of two people united by a purpose greater than both, to care for that extraordinary boy who had taught them all the true meaning of faith, hope, and love. The following months brought profound changes. Marcus drastically reduced his working hours, discovering that he could be a successful businessman without sacrificing his personal life. Gabriel blossomed in ways that went far beyond his recovered sight, becoming a confident, empathetic, and dream-filled child. And Helen remained, no longer as an employee but as an essential part of that family, rebuilt on the rubble of what had been before. There were difficult moments, of course. There were days when Gabriel had headaches from using eyes that had remained inactive for so long. There were times when Marcus relapsed into old patterns, trying to control everything. There were times when Helen doubted herself, questioning whether she deserved all that recognition, but they always returned to the essential. They always returned to the love that united them, and that was enough to overcome any obstacle. 2 years later, on a sunny spring morning, Alistair Manor opened its doors for a special event. Families from all over the city arrived, bringing children with diverse special needs. Marcus and Helen had created a foundation dedicated to alternative treatments combined with traditional medicine, offering hope where before there had only been resignation. Gabriel, now 11 years old, helped welcome the families, his bright eyes and wide smile contagious to all. He told his story without shame, showed the other children that miracles were possible, that it was worth believing. And Helen, surrounded by her team of holistic therapists, open-minded doctors, and dedicated volunteers, saw her dream come true. She had not only healed a boy, she had started a movement, a gentle revolution that recognized that healing is not just a matter of science, but of love, faith, and unwavering dedication. Marcus observed everything from a distance, his heart overflowing with pride. He looked at Helen coordinating the activities, at Gabriel playing with the other children, at everything they had built together, and knew that he had finally found his true purpose. It was not to accumulate wealth, it was to use that wealth to transform lives. When the day ended and everyone had left, the three sat in the garden as they did every evening. Gabriel laid his head on Helen's lap, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Marcus sat beside them, his hand gently touching his son's shoulder. "You know what I would wish for if I could make a wish on a shooting star?" Gabriel asked dreamily. "What, my son?" Marcus replied. "That no child ever has to go through what I went through, that all of them have someone like Mrs. Helen, someone who believes in them even when no one else does." Helen stroked his hair tenderly. "That's the most beautiful dream there is. And do you know what makes a dream even more special?" "What?" "It's when you work every day to make it come true, and that's exactly what we're doing." Gabriel smiled, satisfied, and closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, a shooting star streaked across the sky. The three saw it at the same time, and each made a silent wish. Different wishes, but all connected by the same thread of love that united them. And there, in that garden that had witnessed so many tears and so much suffering, but that now breathed joy and hope, Gabriel Alistair's story found its perfect ending, or rather its true beginning. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. You have to go through the deepest darkness to fully appreciate the light. And you have to have the courage to believe in the impossible, to witness miracles. Gabriel would never forget the 9 years of darkness, but he would also never forget that it was precisely that darkness that prepared him to value every ray of light, every color, every face he saw. He would never forget Helen, the woman who brought not only sight to his eyes but hope to his heart. And he would never forget the transformation of his father, the man who learned humility the hard way, but who never gave up trying to be better. Alistair Manor was no longer a cold and empty place, it was a home full of laughter, hugs, conversations around the dinner table. A home where miracles were not just possible but expected. A home where love had conquered fear, faith had conquered doubt, and light had conquered darkness. And every night, before going to sleep, Gabriel looked out the window, saw the stars shining in the infinite sky, and whispered the same words that changed his life forever. "I can see." End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Gabriel, Marcus, and Helen has deeply touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of faith, overcoming adversity, and unconditional love, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what moment stood out to you the most. Was it when Gabriel first saw? When Marcus finally asked for forgiveness? Or when Helen returned to the mansion? Every day we bring intense stories like this, which reveal the deepest and truest side of the human soul, stories that remind us that miracles happen when we unite love, faith, and courage. We await you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions.